Good afternoon. I am Alldrien Murray, your new host for our vulnerable communities with the REV. The REV, registrate, educate, and vote. One of the first steps to take to not be vulnerable. So, communities, vulnerable communities. So, we have vulnerable communities, we have vulnerable neighborhoods, and all of their vulnerabilities are not the same. Okay, so in some neighborhoods, they are vulnerable according to where they are. They could be vulnerable to the elements, not necessarily people, not necessarily animals, but the elements. So people who live on islands are vulnerable to what? Hurricanes, storms. So we have that in almost all of Savannah, not just Savannah, but Chatham County, and especially towards the east where the water come in, we're vulnerable because we live in the low country. So what about other vulnerable areas? Well, we have areas that are vulnerable in communities where people live, in which they say neighborhoods are where people live and interact with each other. Well, I think in all neighborhoods, communities, in areas where residents live, they interact with each other, but they have different types of vulnerabilities. A lot of times, people live there, may work in the same types of industries, may have the same income or education levels. So it can vary from community to community, neighborhoods to neighborhoods in different areas, in different parts and places where we live. So, vulnerable, what is vulnerable? That's when you're susceptible to emotional and physical attack. And it makes our communities, some communities, more vulnerable than others, according to the things and services that their city government or their county government provides for them. But also, there's something else that plays a big part in that, and that is our elected officials. So that's why we have the part with the REV: registrate, 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 but educate, and then vote. Because when we do that, then we're less vulnerable. So we have the power in our hands because the people are the government. Without the people, there's no government. There's no money for the government. All of the money that the government has are the people's money. So you have to register and vote so you can have a voice on how that money is spent and also how it's distributed to make sure that it's distributed in your communities, in your neighborhoods, so you're less vulnerable. So we got to remember that it's important for us to vote. We have to investigate. We have to ask questions. When people come around and they say, hey, I want you to vote for me. Well, why? Why should I vote for you? How is that going to help me in my everyday life? How is that going to help, the money that's in my pocket? How is that going to help my neighborhood? Is that going to help me with all these cracked up sidewalks or the no sidewalks that we have, you know, or, all of the other things that's going in the community, crime? Is that going to help so I can have like after school programs for my kids? Because I work. I don't just work. I work one job, I get off that job, I go to another job. I might see my children for a little while, you know. So what about that? Because I do pay taxes. I go in the store, I buy things, I pay taxes. So we have to vet people. We have to vet people who come into our neighborhoods and say, trust me. Because kind people say, trust me too. You can trust me, but they want your trust. But I think trust should be earned. So our parents used to tell us, don't talk to strangers. But now that we're adults, we can talk to strangers, but we must ask them questions. We need to ask the questions because when you don't ask strangers questions, they think that maybe, okay, well, I probably can get over them. They're not asking me any questions. So let me just tell them some things and say, hey, trust me. I can do this. I can do that. You can trust me. I'm going to do this for you. So maybe we ought to just really think about when that happens, when we've never seen a person before, we never heard of a person before. We need to ask questions, because when you ask them questions, one thing about con people, they got to remember the first question that they answered, so they can answer the next question correctly, so they don't mess up and say, and then you realize, hey, that's not what you said the first time. So you got to really pay attention when people come around, and when they're asking you something as important as to vote for them. So when you register to vote, you have to educate yourself. And one way is to educate yourself is to pay attention to what they're saying, their talking points, their slogans, because sometimes they're talking in code. And if you don't know what the code is, then it's going to be a problem. So you could sometimes Google can be your friend. Google can be your friend. So let's say somebody is already in that seat. They're already in office. Let's see what they did. You can go and you can Google and see what they voted on. Did they vote on anything that's going to bring monies to my community? Okay, so I'm in their district. They're a state representative. So see, the money comes from Washington, and from Washington it comes to the state, and from the states it goes to the counties and to the municipalities. But then always it may just make it in one part of your county. It may just make it in one part of your city, but you want to make sure that that money makes it in your community, in your neighborhood. So you have to go out and vote. And you have to hold these people accountable who ask you to vote for them. Well, what have you done? Tell me, what bills did you sponsor? Did you co-sponsor to make sure that some money comes in our community? So you got to know the words, you got to know the language. So that's what it is. So the legislator, or where there are the lawmakers, make the laws. They pass the laws and the bills that will determine and affect our everyday life. But more importantly, locally, that's first. Because all politics is local. And that's what they mean by that. So you have to take control and take that power and educate yourself on what have you done for me lately? How have you helped me? Sometimes politicians will help a person, and a person say, oh, they had helped me with this. Well, actually, they did nothing special. They just was doing their job. You're their constituent. If you ask for some help, they're supposed to get you some help in their means, or to direct you to the right place to get some help. So they haven't done anything special. That's not a reason to vote for them. And definitely don't vote for them because they're your neighbor. Don't vote for them because they're your cousin. Don't vote for them because they're your classmate, your pastor, okay? Or just because they're in the same sorority or fraternity than you in. What have they really done? What are they really doing? And does what they did have had an impact? Are they just being charitable? Because charitable don't mean benevolent. There are some people who are charitable and they really aren't nice people. You don't know why they're being charitable. Maybe they just want to tax right off, and some things are just temporary. But to be benevolent and to actually change people's lives, that has a real impact, that's going to help them, not just right then, not that day, but it's going to help them in the future, and not just help them. It's going to help their children. It's going to help their families. It's going to help their whole community. So we really got to think when people come and they're talking to us in our neighborhoods, because we're vulnerable, because we're not educated, and we have to educate ourselves. We have to think. We can educate ourselves. Everyone is not going to always be educated on the same level. Everybody don't have the same intelligence level, but that's okay. But we have to also help each other. So when we know better, we do better. So when we learn and we know, okay, we shouldn't do it like this, we should do it this way, and it works, you're supposed to share it. Share it. So share this video. Share this video. Share, because every week when you come on here with our vulnerable communities, with the Rev, you're going to get some education. So I'm just really introducing myself and reintroducing the show. And I want you to come on every week, listen, share, tell people about it, because we're going to get into some really more things. We got an election coming up. It's too late for you to register for the primary, and that the primary is the Republicans, the Democrats, the Independents, So whichever one you are, you still need to go out there. You still need to register. You still need to vote. You still need to investigate. If you are already registered to vote and you can vote in the primary, that's fine. That's good. But you still have time to investigate the people who are out there. Shout out for the people who are getting off from work, because I know a lot of people getting off from work right now. Some people getting off from work, they only got a few hours and they got to go to another job. So that's just the thing, because they talk about poor people in the vulnerable community. Everybody in vulnerable communities are not poor. We have the working poor. We have people who work. They don't qualify for anything, but at the same time, they're not middle class either, because after a certain income, and the government says, okay, well, I got the scale. You don't make it. You're like $10 off. Can't help you. So you got to do it on your own. So a lot of times they don't talk about the working poor. We got people that go to work every day. They work one job, can work 40 hours a day, but they still poor. They got to take care of their families. They got bills like everybody else. And it's more important, you need to go and vote for people who are going to have your best interest in mind. Don't vote against yourselves. And a lot of times we find that people will do that because people come to people, they know they're vulnerable, they're not well educated on what's going on, what's really happening, and how they can help themselves. But I want people to be able to help themselves. The community that I live in is vulnerable because it's changing. The demographics are changing. A lot of people in my community are elderly, and their houses are being sold. And so we have people who are investors. And what's bad about that, okay, so they will come in, they will buy the house, they rent it out. And that changes the community when you mostly have homeowners in your community. Not that we don't want renters, but if you're going to have a house and invest in that house and rent it, then you should pay attention to what's going on and the tenants that you have that are renting the house. And also, you should respect them as you want them to respect your house and keep that house up. But too many times and in so many places, we have what you call slumlords. So we don't have a whole lot of rent laws here to help people, help the renters, So a lot of times, like anything else, the laws help big businesses, but they also help small businesses too. But they have to still take in consideration the people who are their residents and who are living there. They're human beings. They have families and they have needs and wants like everyone else. And they want the best for their children and their communities. They want their communities to look nice, but so many times everyone is lumped in together as just alike. And that's just not the case. My family lived in the projects, as they say, which was a neighborhood, which was a community of people who loved their children, cared about their children, and wanted their children to be educated. Because I know that's something that was always instilled in me, in our household, and I instilled that in my children, that it's very important to be educated and also to be property owners. You don't just have to get a job. You can think about having a career or having your own business. It's capable. It can happen. It's possible, So it's just so many things, and I can't talk about everything today, but if you register, tune in to our vulnerable communities with the Rev, register, educate, and vote. Your communities will become less vulnerable. So that's what we want to do. We want to take those first steps, and those first steps is to register. And you know what else? The second step, tune in to our vulnerable communities with the Rev so that you can be educated. So I can tell you all the different things that you need to know and what you need to do. Come on to the show, make some comments, ask a question. Let me see how I can help you with that. If I don't have the question on this show, I will definitely come back to you and get you the answer for it. I'm going to find out how you can be helped. Because sometimes you don't know what to ask. You don't know who to ask. And that's okay, because I didn't always know who to ask or what to help ask. But, I'm a reader and I like to read. And I also like to help people. I've been volunteering for a long time, helping in the community, helping in my neighborhood, on the block. I was one of those houses that kids could come to I'm going to look after your kids even if you didn't ask me to. I'm going to feed them even if you didn't ask me to. So I've always volunteered, and I will continue to be a volunteer and be an advocate for children and for those who cannot speak for themselves. So that's why I'm here. And I thought about it, and I thought this is something I need to do. This is my calling. This is what my ministry, as they say, this is what the Lord has placed me to do. He has put me in a position where I could do this, and I have this opportunity, and I got to take advantage of this opportunity in a positive way to help people, and not just to help myself, but is to help many people as I can, to help people to empower themselves. Because you know what? We are not victims. We are survivors. And that's something to really feel good about and to be proud about, is to be a survivor, not a victim. Yes, we have been victimized, and our communities, neighborhoods have been victimized and are still being victimized. But guess what? We are survivors. I made it, and others can make it. Our ancestors were survivors. They survived for us to survive, and we have to do the same thing for our children, our great-grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren, which we have some great-great-grandparents here right now to see their great-great-grandchildren. And so let's not our young men lifespan not be over the age of 21. One time they used to say 25. What looked like it's like younger than that now. We just had a young teenager to pass. And how terrible that has to be for that parent. So we have to think about that. So the people who live in communities that are not so vulnerable, you may live 2 or 3 blocks over from that vulnerable community. Well, when you have a vulnerable community that close to your not so vulnerable community, it's going to creep up on you. There's going to be a connection at some point somewhere. So when you go into the ballot booth yourself, and if you're a registered voter, you're going to have to think about that community that's next to yours, because we are all connected, whether we know it or not. Because some point you have to go out of that community, and you may have to go through that vulnerable community. And so you want to be safe, but the people in that vulnerable community, they want to be safe also. So register, educate, and vote. So I will see you the next time on next week, Tuesday at 4 p.m. for our vulnerable communities with the Rev. Thank you, and have a good evening.
like that.